All right, let us simplify this radical surd. I say radical surd because a surd is a radical and a radical is a surd. Depending on your textbook, means the same thing. I'm going to use the word surd instead of radical, but you know it's a radical. Okay, that square root sign is the house. It's a radical. You can see 48 in there. What we're asked to do is simplify it. Now, in order for us to simplify it, we're going to recognize we're going to come up with two numbers that multiply to give us 48. So that's what we need to do. However, one of those numbers needs to be a perfect square. Why a perfect square? Because if you get the square root of a perfect square, it's a whole number and it's not irrational. For example, if I was supposedly going to get the square root of 48 on my calculator, let me just work that out. Square root of 48 equals 6.92820,323. It's an irrational number. By using surds, we can make irrational numbers look more exact. Using surds makes it exact form. So we want to simplify this in exact form. And in order to do that, we're going to use this tool down here. So we're going to find two numbers that multiply to give us 48. And the two numbers are like this, two numbers under the house. We're going to have two numbers, something times something gives me 48. And that's equivalent to having those two numbers separated, each under the house, each under that surd. So we're going to do that. Now, one of the numbers needs to be a perfect square, like these numbers up here. Perfect squares is like this. The square root of 4, that's a perfect square, gives us a 2. The perfect square of 9 gives us the square root 3. The square root of 16, 4. Square root of 25 is 5. Square root of 36, 6. Square root of 49 is 7. Square root of 64 is 8, and so on and so forth. So let's find two numbers that multiply to give us 48. That's step number 1. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's see now. 6 times 8 equals 48. Isn't that true? 6 times 8 equals 48. But there's a bit of a problem. You see, both those numbers, 6 and 8, are not perfect squares, are they? If I get the square root of 6, it's not going to be a nice number. It's going to be irrational. If I get the square root of 8, that's going to be irrational too. So we need to pick one number times something, another number, and it must give us 48. And one of the numbers, just one of them needs to be a perfect square. Okay, well, let's have a look at which of these numbers divide perfectly into 48. So we can do those two numbers. Let's have a look now. 4, does 4 go into 48? Let's try that. 4 into 48. 4 into 48, 4 goes into 4, 1, 4 goes into 12. Yep, that works. We could do 4 times, that's a perfect square, and 4 times what? 4 times what gives me 48? 4 times 12. Now, that would work, but the 4 isn't the biggest perfect square. So we're going to do a little bit of working. So let's try that out. Let's try that out. So we're going to do this. Now, 4 times 12, all right? So 4 times 12. They're both under the house, so nothing's changed. It's equivalent to the square root of 48. Now, let's separate them the way we do right over here. So we're going to separate them. So there's a square root of 4 times the square root of 12. Now, that's a perfect square. The good news is the square root of 4 is just 2, isn't it? 2 times 2 is 4. So that becomes 2 root 12. Now, we're not finished. We're not finished because we can get simpler than this. Because the square root of 12 there, we can simplify that further. The square root of 12, let me just do it here. Square root of 12 is equivalent to, well, we want to do the same thing. We want to simplify that. So what times what, two numbers, gives me 12? Well, 4 times 3, right? So 4 times 3, the square root of that is equivalent to 12, isn't it? So let's separate these two guys. So that's going to be the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. That still equals 12. Nothing's changed. Good news is that's a square number. There's a square number. Square root of 4, that gives us 2. So that means we can have 2 square root of 3. So that is simplified for the 12. So all we have to do is take that and drag and drop it right over there. So let's go ahead and do that. So we still got the 2, don't get rid of that, times 2 root 3 times 2 root 3. Okay, so let's simplify it further. 2 times 2 is 4. So the answer is 4 root 3. And that's your answer. So if we simplify the square root of 48, it's 4 root 3. Now if you want to do this super quick, instead of having to test and do that, what you do is you find the biggest square number that divides into 48. The biggest square number that divides into 48 is 16, because 16 times 3 equals 48. And that's a big square number, so that means we have the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. That's the same as 48. 16 times 3, 48. Now that's a big perfect square. The square root of 16 is 4, so that 16 turns into a 4, and then bring down the square root of 3, square root of 3. There you go. So that's a quicker way to do it. So if you want to do this really fast, what you want to do is find the biggest square number. Not like me, I found the smallest, the biggest, and you'll get the answer quicker. So if we simplify the square root of 48, it's 4 root 3. Here it is again, 4 root 3. We did it the long way there. So that's how you do it. Thanks for watching.